Welcome to Metal Men's Chronicles, where metal lives. And I know you people are saying, but Metal Ben. Def Leppard Pyromania is not a metal album. And I get that. By today's standards, it probably is not a heavy metal album. But back in 1983, this was considered heavy metal. That's right. Back before, metal got really, really extreme. You know what I mean. But anyways, yeah, this album came out on January 20th of 1983, celebrating its 40th anniversary. Released it on Vertigo in the UK and released on Mercury Records here in the US. So yeah, this album had 10 tracks, The album clocks in at 44 minutes and 57 seconds, produced by Robert John Mutt Lang. I don't really got to talk a lot about this album. I was really debating whether I wanted to review it or not, and I figured, you know what, yeah, why not? Because this album does have sentimental value to me. Because it's probably one of the first actual heavy metal albums I ever heard as a young child. I remember actually hearing this when I was 4 years old in 1983. I know my mother had it on vinyl and my cousin had it on cassette tape, and that's how I remember hearing it as a kid. So yeah, this album has definitely stuck with me for the last 40 years. Don't really got to show it, everybody knows it. And at first, when this album came out, it didn't do so good. Yeah, it didn't chart right away. It took quite a while for it to chart, But eventually, obviously, it did chart, and it's one of the biggest albums ever created and made, Yeah, I mean, this is definitely... The production's definitely huge on here. But the thing I like about this album, it still has that new wave of British heavy metal sound and spot. And this would be Def Leppard's last album, to really embrace that new wave of British heavy metal sound. Yes, it's not full-on new wave of British heavy metal like On Through the Night or High and Dry. Which High and Dry kind of started the beginnings of where Def Leppard would go. And it just manifested into Pyromania, come 1983. And this album took a long time to make. So they recorded this album between January and November of 1982. And there was a lot of frustration in the recording studio. Joe Elliott, vocal-wise, was pushed to his limits. Pushed to breakdown, literally. There were times where he would flip out in the recording studio just from doing vocal tracks because Mutt Lang would keep on making him redo the vocal tracks, which that would definitely be stressing in its own right. And also, in the process, Pete Willis was fired from the band due to alcoholism. He was one of these alcoholics that, I guess you could say when he was drunk, he became really full of himself, I guess is what we could say. He thought he was bigger than he actually was when he was drunk and all messed up on liquor. But he got fired in the middle of Pyromania. But his guitar tracks are still on here. Yes, his rhythm guitar tracks are still on the album. The leads are done by Phil Collins. Yeah, they would get Phil Collins in the band naturally from the band Girl, another new wave of British heavy metal band. With a bit of a poppier edge compared to the other new wave of British heavy metal bands. Which, it's a shame that Pete Willis never ended up staying in the band, but it is what it is. But all in all, this is a damn good album. I still actually listen to this album from time to time, And to me, it's the last good Def Leppard album, because after this, Def Leppard would go downhill into commercial disaster. That's right. And this album definitely became quite big. You still hear tracks from this album played on classic rock radio. Photograph was the first hit off this record. Even though I believe it was the track Rock of Ages that actually blew Def Leppard up. And that was the second single released on this record in June of 1983. Photograph coming out in January of 83. Then Fallen came out in August of 83, and Too Late for Love came out in November of '83. Those were the 4 singles released from the album, and you still do hear them on classic rock radio today. But the rest of the tracks on here, like the deep cuts on here, awesome, man. Like Rock Till You Drop, yeah, cheesy title, but it's a damn good song. And it was original titled Medicine Man and written as far back as 1980. They were actually playing that song live way back in 1980. In fact, you can find a Reading recording of, Medicine Man, which was reissued on the early years Def Leppard box set. And it sounds quite different. It definitely has more of that new wave of British heavy metal sound, where this one might be a tad more commercial sounding, yeah. Oh no, it's still a pretty enjoyable track. Photograph was a huge hit on here, like I said. Decent track, pretty catchy. Stage Fright is freaking awesome. Now, Stage Fright to me is definitely full-on new wave of British heavy metal. Just good stuff. Too Late for Love, yeah, one of the more popular tracks, but it's still pretty damn good. It's got a dark atmosphere to it. Die Hard the Hunter. Let's talk about Die Hard the Hunter. One of the deep cuts on here. What an excellent track. Actually, it might be my favorite on here. It begins very dark. Kind of has like a war atmosphere in the beginning of it. You hear like helicopters in the background, and this dark melodic intro. Then it just turns into a full-on early heavy metal track, I think it's a pretty damn good song. Like I said, it's probably my favorite. You got Foolin', which again has some pretty good melodic guitar work in it. One of the big hits on the album, obviously. Rock of Ages, okay, now that one I'm a little tired of. I mean, it's probably my least favorite track on Pyromania, if we're being honest here. But, it's an alright track. It's one of their huge, huge hits. And it's the track that blew this album up back in 1983. Coming Under Fire is another excellent deep cut. Again, Coming Under Fire has that new wave of British heavy metal sound to it. Action Not Words, definitely a deep cut on here. Still a decent track. Again, one of the more hard rocking tracks on here. And Billy's Got a Gun, what a great way to end this album. Ends off with an epic. What an excellent track. I really enjoyed Billy's Got a Gun. It's one of my favorites on here. Like I said, this album has definitely held up. It's the last great Def Leppard album, because after this, it's downhill. And to me, Def Leppard has not been the same. Yes, as a little kid, I loved Hysteria. Over time, I've grown to not like it so much. Except for maybe 2 tracks off of Hysteria. But anyways, I mean, it's a classic. To me, the album still gets probably a 10 out of 10. Even though, Rock of Ages is like one of my least favorite tracks on here. And it's a track I'm actually really, really sick of. And I can tolerate the other 3 singles over it. But anyways, I still give it a 10 out of 10. The production's excellent on this record. You still got good riffs on this record. And you still have Pete Willis on this record, most importantly. And this would be Def Leppard's last hard-rocking record. Because after this, like I said, it's pretty much downhill. Yep, and this band has never been the same since. But that's my review for the 40th anniversary of Pyromania. Everybody knows this freaking record, but to me it's important to talk about. And we're probably going to do more anniversaries on this channel for 1983 because, man, there's a lot of big ones that came out in 1983. Anyways, like, comment, subscribe. Thanks to all the new subscribers out there, by the way, and keep it metal and keep on rocking. All right, peace.